Thanks for giving me this opportunity, Anna. And again, I'm Simone Montana. I'm a researcher of the Milano Bicocca University and of Mare Center, that is a marine field station located in the Fafua Atoll. And I'm now going to talk about a preliminary development of a monitoring protocol for a Maldivian coral restoration project. So firstly, I would like to really thank Federica Siena and Francesca Fiore that they work a lot on this study, in this project, and also to you, Anna, and MMRI for the great input that are you giving. So the recent nature of the coral restoration programs and the introduction of new technique or the improvement of the existing one has determined the need of a tool better if developed at the national level to evaluate the performance of this project and eventually to compare the results of this activity. So I think that I should not spend too much words about how much the coral reefs worldwide are suffering. They are threatened by many different stresses with the global climate change and the rise of sea surface temperature that is above all of them, causing extreme coral bleaching event that dramatically there are causing extreme coral mortality event. Maldives are not excluded from this scenario. So those are picture dated back 2017 that came from the coral reef surrounding Ara Island. And even if we are observing some natural recovery, most of the coral reef are still appearing like that. So the decline of the coral reef worldwide is increasing the popularity of coral restoration activities, mainly realized through a coral gardening concept that aims at recreating the condition as similar as possible to a pristine reef or not degraded site. So the large reliance on marine resource in a country like the Maldives has led the implementation of these activities. And nowadays there are a lot of coral restoration projects going on in Maldives, mainly happening in resort island rather than in a local island, but conducted with a mix of very different technique and producing data that are not necessarily comparable. So in light of this scenario, we recognize the need to approach at least the monitoring of this project in Maldives an early stage, providing a common guideline. Anna, can you hear me? Anna is fine?
Yeah, it's all right.
Okay.
One of the mics are unmuted.
Okay, it's fine. So, and we recognize the needs of a common guideline. So the purpose of this study, this presentation is twofold. So on one end was to provide to any practitioner in Maldives a common monitoring protocol that can be used to survey the project. And the proposed monitoring protocol aims at coordinate the coral restoration programs in Maldives to produce comparable data that also, if combined, could also give an idea of the cumulative effort made in the country. Then, on the other hand, we recognize also that the coral restoration activity are widely present in Maldives thanks to the initiative of the resort island that considered these activities a way to fund conservation or to engage tourists in environmental conscious activities. So the idea is also to provide a tool to measure the coral reef user satisfaction for coral reefs and, of course, restoration activities in order to be able to indicate to both practitioner or manager if an effective intervention is needed, or how and where to allocate funds for coral restoration programs. And so in order to create the protocol, what we did, so we reviewed the literature and conducted a meta-analysis in order to catalog a paper based on several parameters. In particular, we selected only peer-reviewed paper regarding coral restoration using some specific keywords. And then we collected the information based on some specific categories. For example, the objective of the studies, the phase of the restoration on which the monitoring happened, and the indicator using during the monitoring phase. For indicator, we are thinking to the ecological variable use. Then we use the categorization methodology that is called ABC analysis, that allow us to create a list of indicator based on their importance, on which here we recognize what we define mandatory and discretionary indicator, where for the discretionary are indicators a little bit less important than mandatory, but that can be significantly contribute to the quality of the data collected. So this study came from a review of over 140 papers, and in terms of geographic distribution, appear very clear that there is a very huge gap in knowledge in terms of coral restoration and their performance in the Indian Ocean, with very few information, if not official testimony for the Maldives. And in terms of published paper, most of them have been published in the last 10 years. That's why probably we have few testimony. And anyway, this coral restoration project usually are comprised by three possible phases that can be analyzed separately or in conjunction, that are ex situ, in situ, and the transplant phase. The monitoring phase happens in all these three phases, but however, even if long-term monitoring is considered and necessary steps to evaluate the evolution of the ecosystem or the effectiveness of the project, and most of these studies monitor the project for a period equal or less than 1 year. Then our analysis reveal how identify 12 main ecological indicators using to monitor the project, with growth, survival, health condition, and environmental condition that seems to be the most common. But how you can see, most of the authors measure those indicators in many possible ways. For example, growth, we have papers that have been that measure the fragments with a linear extension, other geometric mean diameter, area, ecological volume, and so on. This is the same for the others. Health condition is the general terms that reflect or summarize a series of states that reflect the health condition of the coral, but most of the time is measured looking at the bleaching, sometimes adding disease, tissue loss, predation, and so on. So apart clear that any practitioner now starting a coral restoration project in Maldives, other than choose arbitrarily among different, very different techniques, they may be also confused in selecting the right ecological indicator to monitor the fragments, and eventually, which is the best methods, the best variables to measure them. And in this context, we use our approach to found for each phase separately what are the mandatory indicators and each phase has their own ones, and the discretionary indicator that I repeat is something less important, but are strongly suggested to be collected. And then in these cases, we also recognize that some of them can be deleted, some of them can be adapted, changed, or moved in other parts. For example, invertebrates that we consider are underrepresented, we change, or we are proposing to change in a mandatory indicator called coral-associated fauna, recognizing that some specific invertebrates provide a very strong benefit for the fitness and long survival of their host. And for this, reason, we believe they have to be monitored in any kind of coral restoration activities. So at the end, we would like, collecting all this information, provide a common protocol on which any phases as the list of mandatory and discretionary indicators that have to be used during the monitoring phase, the instrument and the equipment required to any practitioner to monitor the fragment, and the full extended procedure, the methodology that can be used to measure those variables. In this case, we also recognize the possible needs to have two levels of expertise, simple and advanced. And of course, at the end, in order to make this really a common tool at national level, we would like to provide also a common data sheet on where the data can be commonly collected, and then maybe also deposited in a common data set and used to assess really the whole effort made in the country. That is something related to the monitoring. But the second part refers to what is still missing in any coral restoration manual that you can find, and is the way to evaluate the overall success of your project. And we try to verify this need, introducing new analysis and a way to perform some of them. In particular, we tested for the first time coral reef user satisfaction on two resort islands in Maldives. One was titled the Diamond to the Fushi in South Area Atoll, and the other one Soneva Fuji in Bao Atoll. And they've been chosen these two islands because they were running two different coral restoration projects. And of course, the manager allowed us to do that. So the study was tested using an important performance analysis. That is analysis that traditionally is performed to monitor the services by evaluating the discrepancies between what the stakeholders think is an important component of a specific service and their actual perception of how well the service is being managed. And in this case, we use a reconceptualized important performance analysis, where the performance is usually replaced with satisfaction. And in this case, the analysis is focused on the quality of the experience, with the comparison between satisfaction and importance that provide critical information on where limited resource can be allocated. And to do that, we use a multiple choice questionnaire to measure user importance and satisfaction. And respondents that in this case were considered both guests and employees were asked to assign a value using a 5-point unidirectional scales. And each question include several attributes that should describe the project and of course the reef or whatever we are going to assess. And in this specific case, our analysis supported us in evaluating the low satisfaction of both residents and clients towards three specific attributes: reef color, coral cover, and the reef variety. So identifying priorities for the two resorts in regards to coral restoration, that is, means concentrate your effort regarding this attribute that maybe stimulate the activation of some coral restoration activities. And then in addition, we also apply the correlation analysis to identify heterogeneity across age, gender, and nationality. And in this case, we found something very interesting. And female, mainly local female, Maldivian, showed the higher orientation towards the importance of a coral reef and the higher willingness to participate to coral restoration initiative. So this clearly give inputs on which category should be actually supported for this kind of initiative. So at the end, we really think that standardized science-based monitoring programs are or will become an essential tool for practitioner and manager in order to maximize the relationship between cost and effort benefits, or to decide if launch or not to launch a coral restoration activity, as well as to evaluate that those activities are having the impact that those activities are having on the perception or coral reef user satisfaction, in this case, clients, guests, or whatever. And so at the end, we really believe that the ability of measure the effectiveness of this project will in the future determine their further expansion, and for sure will be will increase their credibility. That is something that we need to speed up the proposal of this activity. So thanks once again to all of my collaborators, and thanks all of you.